I'm beating the Convergence mod as the Servant of Rock class. No intro needed, here we go. Now, if there's one thing I'm known for, it's my banger characters, so I knew I had to cook for you all. After 5 long minutes of moving sliders to the absolute maximum, I made Mike Oxmal, who despite all that, still has my dream physique. With that sad realization setting in, we clicked the finish button to take a look at our new spells, and let me tell you, they were all really good, and by all, I'm referring to my sweet precious swarm of flies. Poison Orb can go jump off a bridge, alongside Poison Mist and Poison Armament. I didn't use any of those once this run. Now, luckily, when I checked my note, it showed that our first rune was located at the Caelid Waypoint Ruins, which is literally just steps away from our spawn point. There wasn't even a boss down there, so we just bomb rushed through it, which turned out to be a very bad idea, but hey, we still got what we needed. Now, within the course of 30 seconds, I get to present to you my next group of spells. Pest Threads, which sends out a stream of little spike things. Chitinous Shell, which is a buff that I don't really want to read. Blighted Orb, which is low-key kind of useful and inflicts Death Blight. Rotten Mist, which is pretty much unchanged from the base game, and Miranda Bloom, which is a DLC spell I never used. Overall, a much needed upgrade to some of those base spells. Now, at this point, I'm kinda lost, because A, we're underpowered, and B, I haven't showered in 6 weeks. My first course of action was to try to get my money up, which went about as well as you'd expect. Now, luckily, this Erdtree Guardian was kind enough to let me slaughter him, so I took full advantage of that to get access to the Erdtree network. Now, for you absolute buffoons who didn't watch my first video, I'll give you the rundown. The Erdtree network basically allows you to travel between the many different Erdtrees of the game, but the catch is, each one's guarded by a boss. This makes it incredibly easy to farm up some runes, but yeah. To save you 3 hours and a lot of unemployment, which is going to be me if you don't join my channel by the way, it's $1 per month. I basically took down the majority of the early game bosses and made my way to the Feet Freak Margit. Now, I want to give a big hug to the Convergence member who made him a walking damage sponge, because that was just too nice of them. Luckily, damage doesn't mean anything when you can just bleed proc him 24/7, so you already know we had to pull that strategy on him. Just look at my skills here, you can smell my expertise through the screen. Towards the end, I did run out of FP, which was an eensy-weensy little problem, but we have a backup thruster just for that. Now, our next rune is actually given to us by Gowry, but we first have to give him the Golden Needle, which is dropped by Commander O'Neill. Now, that's a little bit of a problem, because I'm getting absolutely clapped by his giant spear, and no amount of bleed procs was able to change that. This means I have to skedaddle on up to Stormveil in the hopes of earning some upgrades or something, but all I got was a ballista to the groin and my dignity shattered. I was eventually able to thug it out, and continued my way up through Stormveil just to get absolutely assaulted by 2 Godric Knights. Eventually, I made it to my next grace, which meant we are at Godric, and like a Twitter user who disagrees with someone, we have no choice but to fight them. Or do I, because Mr. Convergence mod thought it was a good idea to buff Gadric the Grafted's health, and unlike you, he's packing. Anyways, I pulled the long game and fought this guy for around an hour and a half, which I feel like is pretty fast for someone who has 400 hours of the game. With that, we're heading back down to Aeonia because my king is still there, and I haven't been stepped on yet. I swear, I didn't want to go from one boss to the next, but apparently that's what I did. To kick things off, I popped the Swarm of Flies, which is still my goat, before running away right into a group of soldiers who started viciously attacking me, despite the fact that I'm one of them. Kids these days, I just can't. Anyways, after spamming the flies a few more times, I realized we were out of magic entirely, which isn't exactly ideal. See, without magic, we have to actually get in close range and salvage up what little brain cells I have left to try and circle him without getting hit, which I'm happy to say, did work. Now, of course, he dropped our Golden Needle, so I decided to make my way up to Sellia, which I figured would be smooth sailing, but oh, how horribly wrong I was. They turned this area into a full-on dungeon, complete with everything that makes a dungeon a dungeon. I just can't use my horse. Anyways, I proceeded forward on foot, and it wasn't too bad. Besides the fact that you can't run in Scarlet Rot, and that there were wolves chasing me down at maximum speed, I was doing alright. That is until I realized those insects were there. Those pests don't deserve to be free, but apparently I didn't get to decide that. I was rotted, and there was no coming back from that. Round 2 at the place went a lot better. I just turned my brain off and booked it past everything I saw, including this clean rot night. This led me to a narrow corridor of rot, which is what some people have described my mental state to be like. Sadly, I made the unfortunate mistake of rolling in the pit, and the buildup just wouldn't stop. At that point, I just started going as fast as I could in the hopes of finding a grace before I got overtaken, which didn't really go well for me, because an Onyx Lord spawned in and blocked the only way forward. After my inevitable demise, I realized there was a shortcut that trivializes the entire first section, so I kicked that down and made my merry way forward, nice and slowly. From there, I camped up on the top of the wall like the cool guy I am and absolutely beamed down the 2 enemies from there. After that, I made my way through the corridor again and actually realized there was a whole little scene going on. I mean, look at them fighting over there. I just absolutely love watching violence unfold right in front of me, but only for the sole reason that I can just cruise right on through. Now, I feel like this is a Starcaller area, but in my last video, I low-key just completely skipped this, so that's my bad. Anyways, we finally were back at the Onyx Lord, who just so happened to get staggered every time I gave him the Thrusty Wusty. Killing him opened up this weird little portal behind him, and gave us access to another section. Hip hip hooray. At this point, I was done going slow, so I went on a record massacre streak, the likes of which have never been seen before, and continued towards a cave because apparently the entire side quest I went on didn't even lead to Gowry. I decided to go in anyway because it looked cool though, and got hit with saturation that not even my thumbnails can rival. I don't know what the Convergence team was cooking up with the colors on those lanterns. Anyways, after heading down a little bit more, I came across a falling star beast who wouldn't stop with me with his long, hard, cylindrical object. So I quit out before I could die and called it there. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Wait, what? I'm not even halfway done writing this script? So after that minor little adventure we went on, I started brainstorming ways to get to Gowry, and I figured out that sliding in from the back should work. But to do that, I had to take down the putrid avatar who was completely helpless to the circle and throw blighted orb strategy, which is peak brain power by the way. After our little squabble, I was able to continue on through the Dragon Barrel region and drop down onto the Millicent's church where I only go for the grace then leave because I'm scared of women. This let us finally access our main man though, who wouldn't stop yapping about how I was supposed to get the needle and give it to him, which I was a little ticked off about, but begrudgingly I made my way back and rested once more so his senile brain could register that I picked it up. And thankfully this time it worked and he gave me the goods. Now we're definitely getting some better spells than we were earlier, and you can tell because I don't know what half these words mean. Or maybe I'm just illiterate. Either way, we kick things off with the poisoned dart, which looking back on, I do wish I used a bit more, but oh well, no use milking over spilled cry. Next up was a buff called Pest Tenacity, which basically reduced the stamina cost of all attacks by 25%, which is pretty good if you're a loser with no stamina. We also got another spell I never used called Convert Corruption, which basically heals your FP and HP to max if it hits someone inflicted by Death Blight. Too complicated for me. But finally, we got my king, my legendary Carrion Swarm, which is just the same thing as the other Blood Ball we had, but much faster and builds up a lot more bleed, which makes me a very happy man. Now I'm all in at this point. We have 2 runes left to grab, so I figured I'd go ahead and swoop those up, but we have an eensy-weensy little problem. The next one is located at Seathwater Cave, which is tough to get to because I don't know Mount Gelmir like the back of my hand, so I decided to head up there, and let me just tell you, I sure do remember the back of this hand because it had me tweaking. I would love to sit down with the Convergence team and have a meeting about their design choices because holy, this guy did not need to be here. My only saving grace was the fact he could bleed, and oh boy, bleed he did, because by the time I finished with him, I had created the bloodbath large enough for a nice, tall, handsome 5'8" guy like myself to be submerged in it. Now I was able to wander on over to the cave, which after all my effort turned out to not even be the one I was looking for. Somehow I got mixed up in my judgment and went for the complete wrong one because I looked at the guide and realized I had to go the Carrion Manor route. Now I was not in the mood for exploration or anything of the sort because we aren't playing as the sorcerer class, which would normally come here, so to avoid talking too much about the overhauled area, I'll just speedrun it. We started by jumping out this window because the main way forward was closed, then jumped down all these little ledges onto the unmoving water wheel, which allowed us to continue our way down to the ground level, which didn't have the abductor virgin we were looking for, so I was a little bit confused. After jumping up the crystals though, I found a teleporter which got us out of that disgusting place for sick freaks and into a fancy new lava castle, which I needed to get through fast because the time crunch for school is all too real. Anyways, I went down into the cave, dreading the fight ahead, but this time it was a Convergence W because they completely removed one of the abductor virgins, making my time so much better. After that, I finally made it to the right cave, which I'm really starting to think I've never done before because I don't remember anything about this, like nothing. Also, random green blobs would just drop down from the ceiling, and since I rolled in the swamp once, I was perma-poisoned, which is enough to put a big old smile on my face. After doing circles for like 20 minutes, I finally found this little offshoot, which led to the Kindred of Rot, which is my least favorite enemy in the game, so I decided to absolutely thrust into him with full-on gusto. Now, after the big man was spent and I had had my fill, I realized that a portal had popped open, so I took it and it brought me straight down to the Lake of Rot. Anyways, we can take a look at our next spells, which, like your music taste, are straight fire. First up was Pest Starch, which goes insanely hard in just about every fight. Then we had Rotten Burst, which is like an AoE that doesn't need too much explaining. And Blighted Contagion, which fires an orb that inflicts Death Blight. Now, I didn't have quite enough stats to wield any of them yet, so I went back to kill a few more bosses, but that was honestly a really bad idea because Erdtree Sentry might finally take the cake as my least favorite person ever, like in the entire world. This guy can actually go jump off a bridge into the Grand Canyon. Anyways, after getting the levels I needed, I was able to go back down to the Rot Lake, which I wasn't expecting to have any crazy overhauling. I mean, what would you do to change a lake? However, from the moment I started exploring, I realized I was royally cooked. The area was just massive, though thankfully they did give me 4 preserving lotuses to start. After that, I made my way along this little dry area, which led me to this absolutely amazing looking arena. Like actually drop dead gorgeous, and sitting in the middle of it was a Dragonkin soldier who was going to be the victim of the Carrion Swarm I acquired earlier. After firing off an absurd amount of them while he was warming up, I was able to get him down to the halfway point, which is honestly pretty mind-boggling. From there, I just dodged and spammed R1 like my life depended on it, and it took him down with 0 issues. Now, the big man dropped a rune that wasn't for our class, so I just completely ignored that and made my way back out and found this cool little platforming minigame. After struggling for a couple minutes, I finally made it and got rewarded with a flowing curved sword, which isn't really good for us at all. Now, I wasn't quite ready to go up into the little structure thing, so I circled it and found a new grace, which had a mysterious locked door in front of it. Since I couldn't go there, I decided to go the other way, and it led to a platform that broke on me, which sucked, but it turned out there was a hidden chest in there that had the dreamer set. What do you think I am, one of those astrologists? Anyways, I kept exploring until I found this little ramp that had a ladder, and you'll never guess what was at the top of it. Another chest! This one actually had a banger in it though, because this was on our path. The Blade of Scarlet Rot, which we didn't have the dex to wield yet, but hey, I don't level dex because I'm a man who enjoys the simple big damage numbers all at once. I mean, who cares about leveling that stupid stat? Alright, I caved, and just this once, all because I had to do it for a video. This does not mean I'm putting on a skirt. Anyways, after pushing on through the rot, I came across this little lighter thing, and that's where it dawned on me. I had to light these in order to open the big door. Now, I'm definitely not one for puzzles, so I wasn't too amused, especially considering the fact I had already been through half the location without knowing this info, but I basically have to or else I can't deliver peak content. My first spot to check was the Dragonkin Soldier monstrosity thing boss arena, and my suspicions were true because there was another one in there that I could hit a light on. Now, since I hadn't been in the big structure thing yet, I decided to go up the stairs and into it, and saw our next brazier, which I couldn't really get to yet because there was too much not ground between us. This had my noodle bamboozled, and before you guys ridicule me for my decision here, I did look around for 20 minutes and couldn't find crap, so I decided to watch a guide, and it turned out this knight was actually sitting on the pressure plate that raises up all the platforms. What a big-boned individual. Anyways, with the door open, I headed down into what I could already tell was a boss fight. Now, thankfully, they added a grace right before, which was a miracle. Also, right next to that grace was a chest which had the shimmering rune of rot in it. Now, the spells in here all absolutely cook for no reason, like rot spray, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, only way more damage than you'd think. We also got Pest Thread Spears, which are basically a mega buffed version of the other pest spells, and then of course the final buffs, which I think are a part of every Convergence class. Aspect of the Scorpion was a melee focused one, which decreased the stamina cost of all attacks while simultaneously boosting absorption. Blessing of the Steel God was the one I had my eyes on though, because it makes you immune to rot and poison while increasing spellcasting speed by 40. Additionally, if rot happened in my vicinity, I got extra stuff, like 50% reduced FP cost of all spells, and boosted physical damage attack power. Now, with all this power, we can take on the final boss on our path. Just kidding, he's cooking me right now. So I made the executive decision to rush the capital, which felt like the right move. I even killed Draconic Tree Sentinel, even though he's optional in the Convergence. Now this time I did remember the path, and I was actually kinda cooking until the sudden death to the duelist. A truly tragic story. The second go round went a lot better though, and I soon found myself on the elaborate tree branch system the creative minds over at Modding Incorporated made with their own blood, sweat, and tears, complete with the bubble guys who had no qualms absolutely destroying you with their fat balls. I did make it past them though, but right at the end I had a mini heart attack when this big branch decided it was a good idea to have a little invisible collision barrier block me. One quit out later and I was outside the door to Sigurd, Knight's Captain, who is easily one of the best bosses in Convergence. Now, while I did want to try my other spells, I still got scared and resorted back to my old ways of R1 spamming carry and swarm for that beautiful bleed proc over and over. I like big numbers, okay? It cooked so hard that he was only in phase 2 for a couple seconds, which I personally won't complain about one bit. I won't subject you to my Morgott complaining either, because this time I was way too locked in to even mess up. Flawless gameplay, man, I'm telling you. Now, while he did drop the third keystone of the forge, I realized we still needed the second. In case you're a troglodyte who doesn't know how the Convergence works, I'll let you in on the secret club. You need all 5 of these little stone things to unlock the forge to burn the Erd Tree, and I'm currently missing one of them. Now, I decided to go with Redmane for this because he's the easiest one to access. After a little jaunt through the castle, which you can see a more detailed breakdown of in my previous Convergence video, I came across this little man, whose sword is absolutely compensating for something. After a quick and easy kill, it was on to the Scourge of the Stars himself, who I never fight without the help of my companions because I'm just so good at the game. Also, pest threads absolutely eats through this guy's health bar like nothing. I didn't even get mad at this boss or anything, though if you enjoy watching me get mad, then go check out School in the Classics. You know, my dad play NES games and still peak content, trust. Anyway, since we're on the endgame roll, I decided to speedrun Farum Azula, which is now located behind the Dragon Shrine thingy, which in my opinion should be the way you access it in vanilla. The platforming is way too much fun for a chill guy like myself. Anyways, I took down both the bosses in my way, and since this video is already running a little long, I'll skip out on the details. Basically, I pulled some really cool crazy gamer moves that made me incredibly cool and popular, and absolutely skedaddled on over to Margit, who was also cooking me. That's when I remembered we had a new boss to beat, so I warped on back with my new gear. After bleeding my way through his entire health bar, I thought I had done it until I realized he was getting back up, and that's a little bit of a problem because my MP isn't exactly full. Of course, I had to come up with a new strategy, and by Joe, I did it. Allocate more flasks to Corellian Tears. After heading back in, I took down his joke of a first phase and let him get back up nice and slow so I could fire off my bleed swarms like it was no one's business. This worked really well, and I realized that getting extra close and comfy nestled between his thighs was the strategy because it seemed like a lot of his attacks couldn't hit me me in there. When the FP ran out, I just had to cut him a few more times before I had him down and was 385,000 runes richer. Plus, I was able to craft the Great Staff of Decay from his remembrance, which turned out to be a colossal weapon and not a staff like I thought. Though I'm definitely not complaining about this. I got to strip and have a giant pounder thing. I of course gave it some much needed upgrades and returned to Malekith, ready to rock and roll, and I'm proud to say that the big blood and random scythe I found on the Radahn battlefield worked wonders and helped me take down the goodest boy of them all with relative ease. Now, the only boss before the endgame trio is Fire Giant, who also gets cooked by the Tri-Scythe, which is just embarrassing for him because he normally wallops me. Now we can burn the Erd Tree and speedrun to the end. I'm not surprised by the scarred entrance anymore, though I will admit it's still pretty cool, and what's cooler is the damage numbers we're putting up and how much I remember the Crucible Knight moveset. I am proud of myself, even if I'm a failure in every other way. Next up was Godfrey, who went down without a fuss, and Radabeast, who didn't stand a chance against the almighty power of the Tri-Scythe. After the final amazing blow, I was done. Run was finished. As always, please remember to subscribe. I want to hit 50k by the end of the year. I know it's a big goal, but we got it, trust. Anyways, I'm not going to overstay my welcome here, so bye!